This is Carolina Business Review. Major support provided by Colonial Life, providing benefits to employees to help them protect their families, their finances, and their futures. High Point University, the premier life skills university focused on preparing students for the world as it is going to be. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
Welcome to Carolina Business Review. I'm Laura Ulrich, filling in for Chris William, and you're watching the longest running and most widely watched program on Carolina business, policy, and public affairs, airing weekly in North and South Carolina for over 30 years. We're grateful for your support. Today we're going to talk about two very hot topics, higher education and the workforce. North and South Carolina continue to see strong economic development and employment growth. And with this comes an increased need for skilled workers. Our guests today will all play an important role in leading these efforts. The conversation starts now.
Major funding also by Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, an independent licensee of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association, and Martin Marietta, a leading provider of natural resource-based building materials, providing the foundation on which our communities improve and grow. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Scott Hamilton from the Golden Leaf Foundation, Andy Carr from SCMEP, and special guest, Dr. Tim Hardee, president of the SC Technical College System.
Scott, Andy, thanks so much for joining the show today.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for the chance to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this conversation because I do feel like both these topics are just top of mind for a lot of people across both states. So, Scott, I want to start with you. I know Golden Leaf spends a lot of time in the economic development space and workforce development. So, one question I have is workforce development more important today than it was in the past? And is there anything you're seeing that you think deserves additional funding or is really making a difference in that space?
Laura, thank you. It is probably the most critical time for workforce development because of, as you know, a tight labor market, and that tight labor market's going to go on for a long time. And so we have to have the tools to help those folks enhance their lives, to be able to enhance their economic opportunity. And so the way we have looked at it in North Carolina, and some of the things that I've seen, not just in North Carolina, but in other states, I'm really a big fan of apprenticeships and the partnership with manufacturers, high schools and community colleges and universities to be able to develop those skills that those manufacturers need. At Golden Leaf, when we look at funding a project, we want to know what is that clear and direct opportunity for employment. So when somebody comes to us about funding for a workforce development project, we want to know what are the available jobs in that area. And then what are the collaborations? And so across North Carolina, there's a couple of different opportunities where the school system, the manufacturer, and then also the community college, and then in some cases the university, all have a clear pipeline to start training those students so when they get that degree or credential, there's an employment opportunity waiting for them. And that also helps the manufacturer because they know they've got a labor pool coming. But we also have to look at those non-traditional students that have not gone on. Maybe they dropped out of high school or graduated high school but didn't go to a college. Or those that started a degree but never finished. How do we get them back and how do we train them to have the skills for some very meaningful employment?
Right, and that could be a challenge, right? So what are you seeing, Andy, in South Carolina? I'm sure some similar efforts. Are you seeing things that are really making a difference?
Yeah, I am. There's been a tremendous focus on it, and resulting last year in the governor passed Act 67, and that resulted in a coordinating council for workforce development to bring together all the different entities across South Carolina that are involved in workforce development. Everything from the Education Commission, the Manufacturing Extension Partnership, State Technical College System, Department of Commerce. So bringing all that together, streamlining it, making sure that both job seekers and employers know the services that are there and that it's much easier to navigate. It's a work in progress, but it's made a tremendous progress since last July. So yeah, a lot going on there. Workforce, I would say it's always been a challenge, certainly the last 6 or 7 years, and then COVID, put another wrinkle in it there. But I think the state's responding to it well. So a lot of good stuff going on there.
Yeah, so let's talk about workforce a little bit more. One of the interesting stats I saw recently was about immigration and how the foreign-born working population has recently risen and has helped fill some jobs that maybe had some vacancies before. How are you seeing this play out in South Carolina? Are you hearing a lot about immigration?
We've heard a little bit about it, Laura. I think, alternative sources, from organizations such as Able SC, people with disabilities and challenges, working with employers to be able to bring them into the workforce, people that have been, in the justice system, reintegrating them and bringing them back in. So expanding that the thought around about the labor pool, so not just traditional, a lot of thinking around about part-time workers, whereas before, certainly in manufacturing, that was always viewed as like, ooh, I'm not sure we can do that. There's some downsides, but there's not. When it's done and done properly, it's a vast untapped labor pool. The people that are looking for shorter hours and more flexibility. So all those conversations around about different ones to think of non-traditional labor pools is very valuable.
Yes, so Scott, I know with Golden Leaf, your mission is tied to Eastern North Carolina, mostly the rural parts of the state that were tied to the tobacco industry. What are you seeing in those parts of the state in terms of immigration, but also maybe these non-traditional pathways?
A lot of conversations lately with the ag community about the H-2A guest worker visa program for farmers, and that provides the labor. And the interesting thing about that program is the farmer has to demonstrate that they've tried to hire from within their community and can't find the workers. And that is a part of the application process. So they're not displacing jobs. They are bringing in guest workers to be able to work on a temporary basis, to do some work where they can't get others to be able to do that. So getting that, also there's some complexities with that, and there's some national policy discussions going on about that to kind of help refine the H-2A program. And I think that needs to be addressed, and of course immigration nationally needs to be looked at, and I think the national policymakers are looking at which comes first, and so they're going at it from that direction. But I think the comment about the non-traditional worker and looking at some of those folks with the labor participation rate, I think is about 62% right now. Highest I went back and looked at, and it was probably around 2000. In 2000 was about 67 to 68%. So that's a lot of people. The percentage numbers don't sound like a lot, but when you start looking at each of those numbers and what that means, that number of people not in the workforce, how do we find them and help them get back into the workforce? Because those coming that are justice involved, those that are coming from recovery and trying to find work, they have a job, the recidivism rate's going to be much lower.
Right.
And,
That's right.
I'd like to say a job is hope, opportunity, and dignity. And when you have those three things, it solves a lot of issues. Doesn't solve them all, but it certainly solves a lot of them, and it reduces that recidivism rate, both either on justice involved or in addiction.
Right. Yeah, that's right. So I'm going to change topics just a little bit, still about workforce, but I want to talk about AI while we still have some time. So this is something that I feel like you can't go a day without hearing about AI, but how is this already impacting manufacturing, and what do you see in the near term?
A lot of excitement and adoption, mainly by the larger manufacturers at this point. And our organization is there to help people understand it and understand the benefits of it, and that it is affordable. And then also the caveat that you can't afford not to do it. So the challenges for manufacturers, the four main things, it's always cost, quality, delivery, and safety and employee morale, those things. And with artificial intelligence and a whole host of other advanced manufacturing technologies, we've now got an even bigger toolkit to solve those challenges. Artificial intelligence, very exciting. We've worked with companies maybe 4 or 5 years ago that can now process huge amounts of data and be able to understand and get to the root cause of quality problems and get to the root cause of why machines have excessive downtime and things like that. So huge applications for it there. We're starting to see manufacturers roll it out in the areas of marketing. We're starting to see them roll it out customer service. And then also in HR and the human resource field, and basically tools to help there. So again, back to the workforce issue. So yeah, very, very exciting and very wide open at this point.
So are the investments companies are making in this, is it primarily to deal with worker shortages, labor shortages, concerns about that, or is it to save money? Is it both of those things equally? Like, what's the main reason companies are saying, okay, we're ready to invest in this?
It's all of the above. I mean, I think from our perspective, we always encourage them to don't focus on the tech, focus on the business case. What's the problem you're trying to solve? And then determine which technology will help you solve that most effectively and give you the quickest return on investment.
I think AI is going to be very disruptive to the manufacturing process. And I go back to, been around a while, so you go back to the early 90s when advanced manufacturing was kind of the new term, and there used to be a joke about manufacturing employment locations in the future would have one person and a dog. And the person was there to feed and water the dog, and the dog was there to keep the person from touching the machinery and the equipment. Because they were saying that this was going to eliminate a lot of jobs. Well, it changed the style of jobs. It enhanced those jobs. And I think AI is going to do the same thing. Whenever there's change, people are very unsure. But AI will be disruptive, but I also think that it is going to create new opportunities for higher skilled jobs, and they're going to be much different. But those opportunities are going to still be there.
Yeah, really, really interesting to see how this is all going to play out. So let's take a second here and look at who's coming up in the next few weeks on the show. Next week, we have Lou Kennedy, who's CEO and president of Nephron Pharmaceuticals. And also coming up soon, we have Sean Suggs, president of Toyota Battery Manufacturing in North Carolina. So make sure you tune in and look out for both of those shows. So we're now going to welcome our special guest, Dr. Tim Hardee. Tim is the president of the South Carolina Technical College System, which includes 16 institutions across the state and serves over 134,000 students. Tim, thanks so much for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, really good to see you. So I'm going to start out with a topic that has been in the news a bit lately, and that is the decline in FAFSA applications this year. So right now, as of April 12th, in South Carolina, FAFSA applications are down 34% compared to this time last year. So I want to know what you think about this. What do you think is going on, A? And B, what does this mean for fall enrollment in higher education?
Well, right now we have a lot of nervous financial aid directors at our 16 technical colleges across the state. I do think the federal government will get it fixed. I think it's certainly delayed that piece. We're hopeful that the sooner it gets done, the less it affects our enrollment for the fall semester, because as we're talking about workforce and the need for us to be able to bring people in. While the South Carolina legislature has done a great job of providing scholarship for students, the reality is many of our students rely on Pell to be able to participate, and certainly the FAFSA has to be completed and done for them to be able to access those federal funds. So right now we're in a bit of a wait and see mode, but hopeful that it will be fixed sooner instead of later. So
I have a follow-up to that. So is there a role for people like Scott and Andy for their organizations in this? Like, there's time for this to improve, but time is ticking. Is there a role for people outside of higher ed to play in this?
Well, I think recognizing that we're all in this together in terms of South Carolina, when we're looking at 3% unemployment, the reality is you need to have a pathway to provide that trained workforce without students having access to our technical college system. It really gets us to the point of not being able to fulfill the needs of business and industry. So I think all of our voices together always are much better than the lone voice out in the wilderness.
Right.
So I think it certainly stands. And really, when you're dealing with issues like that, right now it's a national issue. So it's really not just North and South Carolina. It's an issue across the country that's creating problems for both 2- and 4-year institutions.
So, Scott, do you have a question?
I do, and I'll follow up on that. In North Carolina, we have a number of opportunities to help offset the cost of going to community college. In fact, Golden Leaf has a scholarship program that funds students that are in rural communities across the state to be able to go. What does South Carolina do to help offset those costs for students to attend?
South Carolina made a decision about 5 years ago to invest in something called SCWINS, South Carolina Workforce Industry Needs Scholarship. That the legislature decided we don't have enough nurses, we don't have enough welders, we don't have enough people in technical careers. So let's, as a state, incentivize people to go in the career fields where we have shortages. And so that 5 years has gone from 17 million in scholarships for students to 95 million. So the state's invested heavily in being able to encourage students. We find with the technical college system, many times it comes down to as simple as I have $300 left on my tuition, I have to pay my electric bill or pay my tuition. That's a tough choice to have to make, but individuals have to make that choice, and this SCWIN scholarships enables them to have a way to cover that $300 worth of tuition. When you multiply that out over 100,000 students, 95 million goes quickly from that side. But it's what the legislature in South Carolina has decided. If we are going to have a highly skilled workforce, we need to get people in on the front end by enrolling them in our technical college system.
So I have a follow-up to that. And with the SCWINS program, has that shifted demand, student demand for programs? I mean, are students going into those higher demand job or fields now that money exists? Have you noticed shifts?
It certainly has. Our enrollment has increased it in those healthcare, computer technology, construction type careers. The other area where it's really increased is we tend to talk a lot about degrees, diplomas, certificates with the technical college system and associate degrees and transfer to 4-year institutions. But these scholarships actually cover short-term training programs like I'd like to become an electrical lineman, I'd like to become an EMT, CDL driver. So the legislature has recognized that it doesn't always need to be a 2-year career path to a degree. It can be a 16-week electrical lineman program that at the end of 16 weeks you're qualified to go to work with Duke Energy or Santee Cooper or our 20 electric co-ops across the state. So it's really a different pathway that doesn't mean you have to earn a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree. There's different ways to get in that workforce quickly and to be able to get a good job in the state of South Carolina.
Excellent. Excellent. Andy?
Yeah, Tim, a question for you. We touched on it already, with artificial intelligence. What do you see the impact of artificial intelligence being on the state technical college system, the instructors, and ultimately the students?
Well, I actually had a meeting earlier this week with Representative Jeff Bradley, has been assigned as the chair of the Artificial Intelligence Committee for the House of Representatives, and met about how are we going to partner with that with the technical college system. It is not a single answer to that for us. I think it will be more cybersecurity programs, more of those type programs we offer through the technical college system, but it's really an all-encompassing issue in that it becomes more of everyday life for all of us in terms of artificial intelligence. Now, I think the job market piece will certainly reflect that because there'll be a greater need for people with that expertise. And I think our technical college system over time, right now, honestly, we're all figuring out what that looks like. And I think that's for any of us is part of that reality of we know just enough to be dangerous. And then, we need to navigate being more knowledgeable about AI and how it certainly can benefit us. But for our community colleges, it will become a way of life, just like other technologies have become.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Really exciting and challenging, right? Both at the same time. So, we were talking about economic development and workforce development before you joined us, and it's really striking how many economic development announcements there have been in North and South Carolina in the electric vehicle space, especially. What's the role of the technical college system? These huge number of jobs that are coming, Scout and Redwood Materials. How do you train the employees they need to fill those jobs?
Well, part of that incentive package for them coming to the state of South Carolina is us reaching an agreement. You mentioned Scout Motors. They're announcing 4,000 employees to build that vehicle in Blythewood area near Columbia. The technical college system is, I like to say, Harry Lights, he's our Department of Commerce. Harry convinces them to come to South Carolina. Then he turns them over to me to say, now you figure out how to get 4,000 people working there. And our job is, in essence, is to provide Scout Motors with 4,000 qualified people to go to work there. We don't do that overnight. We actually use a model where we send a team over to Germany to take a look at their facility as a Volkswagen subsidiary. How do they train their people there? We'll take some of those practices where we discover, then we'll design a curriculum, and then we'll deliver the curriculum. So it's sort of we call it a 3D process. Our Ready SC division of the South Carolina Technical College system provides that. 50 years ago, it was Michelin. 30 years ago, it was BMW. 15 years ago, Volvo. Now it's Scout, Redwood Materials, and those companies. But Ready SC has delivered that over the years for new industries coming into South Carolina.
They're proven track record
Well,
there.
and those are ones where I think that helps us to attract those industries, because we still continue to work with the Michelins and BMWs even decades later.
Right. Excellent. Scott?
I was going to follow up on that, and you just mentioned a little bit earlier the unemployment rate in South Carolina, 3%. Earlier we mentioned labor participation rates about 62%. What are some of the unique things that South Carolina's community college system are doing to pull in some of those folks that face barriers to employment to help address these? I mean, that's some large numbers to have to try to fill positions for. Plus, you're going to have to backfill some of the positions that where the workers are leaving one industry to go to another. Now you've got to train those folks. So what are some of those innovative ways to pull in that segment?
Well, with 3% unemployment, you can't afford to leave a stone unturned, I would say. And it's one of those things where you mentioned earlier Department of Corrections. I think in the conversation, that's an area where we're trying to, 6 months before you're released from the Department of Corrections in South Carolina, why not have the technical college system come in, provide training in an area that's needed? We certainly don't want you to end up back in prison, so why not provide you with a skill and with a job that's needed in South Carolina. The Hispanic community, we're seeing that as a growing population in the state of South Carolina. How do we involve them in our technical college system in a more committed way? I think it's just an avenue of where we're trying to make sure that we provide that opportunity in our local communities. We have a program called Start College here in South Carolina that's geared towards recruiting students directly out of high school into those career fields where we have the shortages. Marketing is different to an 18-year-old than it is to a 45-year-old.
Right, absolutely.
And so we've tried to navigate our marketing towards what is an 18-year-old looking for directly out of high school, and how do we encourage them to go into, we mentioned earlier, cybersecurity. You love playing video games. How do we turn that skill set into cybersecurity and something that's actually a job at the end of that? So you have to be creative with it, but it's really, there's no one thing that fixes that. It's a multitude of options.
Yeah, Andy?
Yeah, Tim, again, I'm biased towards the manufacturing community, and there's very much, it's a partnership, between, Ready SC, the technical college system, and the manufacturers. What would your advice be for manufacturers that want to grow the talent pool? What do they need to do to help address this challenge?
A lot of times, Andy, I tell manufacturers they need to praise themselves in their local communities. They are employers of choice that provide great jobs in their local communities. I think sometimes they're so busy at being productive and efficient, they don't tell their story enough in the local community to the importance of county councils, of how their tax base is better because of their manufacturing, the jobs they provide, the economic development in the community. They're so intent on being successful with their business and operating it well, they don't sing their praises enough. And actually accessing those high school students so that they actually know about the great jobs that exist. We used to in South Carolina call manufacturing 3D jobs, dark, dirty, and dangerous. Now I like to use the term 4H jobs. They're high tech, high pay, high demand, and high mobility. So we try to navigate towards, we're not your grandfather's technical college system, and look at that in terms of there's great jobs available in the manufacturing community, and use the technical college system as a way to access those jobs.
Thank you.
Go ahead. No,
Do
go
you
ahead.
see the perception changing with this incoming labor pool? The students are, in North Carolina, I think every state starts talking about the perception of what your parents or grandparents' manufacturing was to what it is today. Do you see that perception starting to change and people really understanding that this is much different?
And we got about 20 seconds left. So.
It's definitely changing. I think it's changing because career opportunities are there for students that maybe didn't exist before. Where directly out of high school, there's a job that pays high. You go to the technical colleges in 2 years, you have that job that pays $75,000 a year. That gets both parents and students' attention.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Tim. I think we could talk about this for hours, but thank you all for joining us today. And make sure to join us next week on Carolina Business Review.
Gratefully acknowledging support by Martin Marietta, Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, Sunoco, High Point University, Colonial Life, and by viewers like you. Thank you. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.org.